Right, now streaming live on YouTube. So if you make me the host, your job is done. Right, now streaming live on YouTube. So you,
Oh. Okay, streaming live. Can you still hear me?
yes,
Okay, okay. Okay, so if I go to Don Moore and
make host.
make host. Yes.
And now I'm the host.
Okay.
And Mike Chamberlain's looking to get in.
All right. That should be good then.
All right, thank you very much, Johnny.
Yep, no problem.
We'll see you in the
See ya.
morning.
Yep.
Good evening, folks.
Good evening. So we're already broadcasting live to YouTube. It's because I had someone from the office set it up because I'm taking this from home.
Hello.
Hi.
Good evening.
Excuse the messy room.
That was
I
quite
need
all
to
right.
get a nice background or something that hides my chaos.
Or Sue, you could always claim that that's your false background.
Oh, right. Never thought of that, Mike. Okay, this is just a false background. It's not really the mess of my office.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, I need to turn the volume up. Could somebody speak so I could adjust my volume?
I'll go ahead and do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you want to do it again?
Sure. So
Hmm.
I'm Irish by heritage, so we've always liked to be behind the microphone.
It's not working very well for. Oh well. We'll make do. I better go grab the hearing aids. I'm serious.
They're great, aren't they, Susan?
She can't hear you.
No, I'm going to get a hearing test because I'm either losing some hearing or the guys I typically play golf with are playing a great practical joke on me by whispering all the time. And I don't know. And both are plausible.
It's probably time, Don.
Yeah, likely.
Do I have you guys all on mute?
No, we're just,
Okay. It was so quiet, I'm thinking.
Being quiet.
I think when I advised people that we're already broadcasting live, it wasn't something that encouraged dialogue.
Hello, Stephen.
Oh, hello. I heard time getting on this afternoon for some reason.
I wonder if the same thing's happening to Peter.
B.
He has my cell number if he needs it, so.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Brett.
Brett.
Hey, Brett.
Hi,
Hello.
Brett.
Well, Susan, I was out to your offices yesterday. And,
Yes, right.
I had eye surgery this summer for cataracts. So
Right.
I don't wear my glasses only for reading or meetings. I can see far away. So Sherry looked at me. She said, "Who are you?"
Yeah. Yeah, we've had a busy time out there.
Yes, you guys. Yeah. I feel so bad about the church.
I know. Especially when it was preventable.
That's a good point.
Somebody bleeped and left.
There we go. The boss is coming in.
Hi, Peter.
So you're on mute, Peter.
Right. Sorry, I'm a couple of minutes late.
Oh, that's all right.
Pardon? That's fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Is everybody here? There?
Everybody's here and we're already live on YouTube.
Okay, great. Then I'll call the meeting to order. Could we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So move, Mike, Laney.
I'll
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Does anyone have any conflict of interest to declare tonight? No. Okay, having heard none, I guess we'll move right into the heart of the meeting with Mary Kay Langton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to take a moment and share my screen with you all.
Sure.
Everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. So this is the information that you were sent out earlier today. And I'm going to start with taking you through the numbers. And then I think most of the discussion will pour out from there that's already in my staff report. So we will start with the corporate services. So what you see in front of you is where we think we're going to finish the end of 2020. So if we just take a moment, I like to use the highlighter because it keeps you in the same spot that I am. So there we go. So the first column that you see in front of you is the 2020 approved budget. The column beside that is the actual financials from January to November. And then the column beside that is what we predict December's financials will be. Taking those two columns, adding them together gets you to the projection for 2020, which is the column that we will focus on mostly today. And then the difference is just the difference between the annual budget and the 2020 projection. As always, negative numbers are unfavorable variances and positive numbers are favorable variances. So we start with corporate services, as we always do. And for 2020, we are projecting to have expenses in our corporate services of just over $570,000. Now, this compares favorably to what we had budgeted of $603,500. And that's about a $33,000 savings. Where that comes from, you can see above, we had some overages in our salaries and benefits. We did bring on additional staff member after the budget was prepared for 2020, but we had savings in our governance expenses as well as our administration expenses. So those savings are then all allocated out to the various divisions based on how the budget is allocated. So you're going to see those come in when we look at our various divisions. So the first division actually, because corporate service isn't really its own division, it has expenses and it's allocated out. But the first division that we look at is regional planning services. So for 2020, we are projecting to have a surplus in our regional planning services of just under $39,000, which you can see right here. And what makes that up is solely expense savings. So if we jump up to expenses, you'll see that we spent nothing for regional planning, even though we budgeted $20,000. And then our corporate services allocation, we had budgeted almost $95,000. The allocation was actually about $76,000. So we saved about $19,000 there. So those two numbers added together generate what is the surplus for regional planning services. As we've discussed in our quarterly finance committee meetings, we do have money, revenues from the pool study that we performed, as well as the expenses, but they offset each other. So there's no net impact to the RSC with regard to those. So for this division, there's really no anticipated need for any reserve funds. So we're recommending that we let this surplus stand, and it would come through in our 2022 budget as a second previous year surplus. Any questions on that one before I move forward? All right. That brings us to our planning and development services. So for planning and development, the surplus that we are projecting for 2020 is just under $54,000. You can see here at the bottom. And when you look above, you see what that's made up of. So our revenues are slightly under what we had budgeted, but very small. And the majority of those savings come from expenditures. So you can see all but one line of expenditures are actually under what we had budgeted. So that's what's driving the surplus in this division. And the major savings is salaries and benefits. We did have a staff member that left earlier in the year. They weren't replaced for a few months, and they were replaced with a less senior staff member. So that led to some savings with regard to salaries. And as per our reserve fund policy, planning and development has two reserve funds, an operating reserve and a capital reserve. And our reserve fund policy specifies that we maintain $25,000 in our operating reserve and $8,000 in the capital reserve. And these reserve funds are already fully funded from previous years. So there's no real need for us to transfer more money into them. So our recommendation as staff is to let this surplus stand, and it will flow through again in 2022's budget as a second previous year surplus. Any questions on that one? Okay. So that brings us to the solid waste division. And as I start the solid waste division, this is the division that we would expect to have transfers in, and those have been included in this projection. So I just want you to make you aware of that. If we were to look at these numbers before considering any transfers, solid waste produced a projected surplus of just over 459,000 before we start moving funds around. So I'm going to focus on this 2020 projection column because we're going to get into the variances when we go to the more detailed sheets in the following 2 slides. So for 2020, our goal, well, in every year, our goal is always to end the year with a surplus of around 100,000. So however we have to move around funds to make that happen, that's where we want to be. And what 100,000 really does is give us a buffer, because if something unexpected occurs in the next 3 weeks, we want to have room to be able to absorb it within the current surplus and not go into a deficit position. So that 100,000 allows us to do that. And we're going to see the details on the subsequent 2 sheets. But what we see is all our revenues actually exceeded budget and our expenditures were under budget. So it allowed us to have that surplus and allowed us to transfer money to a reserve fund when we were actually going to take money from a reserve fund in the budget. So positive story all around. We're going to be able to put some money away, which we didn't anticipate, and that's always good news. So if we go to the landfill first, down at the bottom again, for 2020, we are projecting a surplus of just over 979,000. And when you look at these 2 variances, it looks like they're both unfavorable. So you may say, oh, well, we weren't over in revenue, maybe we were over in expenses. But I want to point out something. You'll see in here, we had transfer from capital reserve. We don't need to do that. So in reality, because this variance is negative, it's pulling down our other variances. So if you take that out of revenue and just look at what our actual sources of revenue before considering reserve fund transfers, our revenue was actually over our budget by just under $80,000. And that was good, especially considering our tonnage is running under budget. It's about 600 tons under what we had budgeted for 2020. And our C&D is just slightly under budget. But as we've discussed in previous meetings, the elm tree tonnage was significant in 2020. It was about $244,000 over what we had budgeted for this year. So that's substantial. We haven't seen them bring that amount of tonnage in ever. And then as we've discussed before, the UNB ash tonnage was down as well. So it was down about 105,000 less than what we had budgeted. So all those together produced a positive variance from budget. And then if you look at the expenditure side, what you see is there's a number of expense savings, and those are mostly to do with COVID. So we did change our operations. We had minimal staff for a month, at least, maybe more. So that resulted in some savings with regard to our equipment, as well as our baling facility, which was closed for the majority of the year. So that resulted in some savings as well. And what that allowed us to do is in the maintenance, there were some projects that were able to be completed that wouldn't normally be able to, like piping within our landfill, some pump upgrades. Brett can give you all the details behind those if you would like them, but that's where you're seeing these additional costs with regard to maintenance. Projects that were needed to be done, and we did have the money to be able to do it as a result of the change to the operations. Post-closure expenses is another one that is over budget, and that has to do with the year-end adjustment that we will be making as of the end of December to bring it up to the liability amount that we need for year-end. And full disclosure, I did make a couple changes to this sheet after it was sent out to you. I broke out the 2 transfers so you could see them separately. They were grouped together in the copy that you received, but now that I've broken them out, I think it makes it a little bit more clear. So what we are recommending as staff to the Finance Committee is to transfer $214,329 from the Solid Waste Operating Fund to the Power Generation Operating Fund. This was an amount that was budgeted in our 2020 budget because we needed to balance that Power Generation Fund, because you'll recall in 2018, we had a significant second previous year deficit that came into our 2020 budget. So that amount was budgeted. We are recommending that we go with the budgeted figure and bring that over to Power Generation. The one that is not in accordance with the budget that we are recommending is that we transfer money to the Capital Reserve Fund of $145,000. And that essentially is the amount that brings us to that $100,000 surplus that we like to leave in the Solid Waste Operating Fund. So what you can see up here is in the budget, we were planning to take money out of the Capital Reserve Fund to pay for cell costs. We didn't need to do that this year. We were able to pay for our cell costs through operations. Through additional savings, we're able to put some money away into that reserve fund and build that up. And that's a good thing, because in 2022, if we don't get our EIA approved, we have a significant cell costs that are going to be substantial to our budget at that point. So I think putting as much money away in that reserve fund at this point is the best thing that we can do. So if that $145,000 transfer is approved, that would leave a balance in the Capital Reserve Fund of just over $2,166,000. Any questions on the landfill before I move on?
Mary Kay, if I might,
Sure.
Where are we with the operating reserves for landfill?
We have just over 400,000 in our operating reserve.
Okay.
However, Peter, that money is earmarked for a special purpose, so we don't usually take money out of the operating reserve. It's mostly the capital reserve that we deal with.
I was just curious as to where we stood against our policy, or in complying with the policy. So we're way over.
Yes, except that it is for a specific purpose with regard to that. Yeah. So it's not like it's money that's kind of free and sitting there and we can take it out at any point. It's always been set aside, and it's to pay for the retirement allowance that we have for our staff.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to recycling. So the recycling facility was probably one of the most impacted with regard to the COVID-19 shutdown. And it was actually a positive thing that came out of it. So although we are seeing less tonnage that came in, as you can see, the sales are under by about 64,000 from what we had budgeted. We were able to realize management did a really good job at looking at ways that we could save costs. And they were able to come up with savings, you can see, projected to be just over 349,000. And majority of that is relating to salaries and benefits. Staff was moved around as a result of having to distance, but it became a positive thing, and it actually produced a projected deficit of just under 879,000 compared to what we had budgeted of 1,164,000. So significant savings there. And I think that's going to continue in the future with the new way that we're going to do business in the recycling facility. Any questions on that one? Okay. So that brings us to our last division, which would be the power generation division. So for 2020, I don't think this is going to be a big surprise for anybody. We are projecting a deficit in the power generation fund. And that is to the tune of about $410,608. And if you look above, you can see where that comes from. Basically, our revenues, we're projecting about a 239,000 variance from the budget, unfavorable variance. And the other one would be our maintenance costs. They're higher than what we had budgeted. As the engines get older, we know that maintenance costs go up. And that's something that has been over budget for the majority of the year. So that's what's driving that deficit that we are going to have to carry into 2022. Questions on the power generation?
Just a quick question on the engine maintenance program. When we first started out with that, there was a certain number of, I think it was 40,000 or 60,000 hours that a major maintenance was performed. Does that what do you call it, number of hours change as the equipment gets older?
I'll let you answer that one, Brett.
Yeah, sure, Peter. The major maintenance intervals, like you said, are every 20,000 hours. We have less substantial intervals every 10,000 hours. Both engines right now, I believe, are between 40 and 50,000. There may be some savings on our 50,000 hour maintenance intervals as a result of some of the work that we've performed this year. I believe that may be what you're getting at. But really the two challenges this year on power generation, one was on the revenue side, like Mary Kay said, had to do with COVID issues as far as getting qualified technicians in from Enerflex to do service work to enter the province. It's a little slower these days to get them in, and that impacts the revenue, increases downtime. We also had a number of unplanned maintenance events come up. So just as an example, we've had to replace the heads and the cylinders in both engines this year as a result of siloxane buildup. So we kind of got hit on both sides this year.
Okay.
Susan, did you have a question?
There. Yeah, I was just wondering, when I read the report and you were talking, and part of what you just answered, Brett, if I may, was I think to do with the aging life of the engines. Overall, has the gas recovery or power generation, has that actually been beneficial? Like, what are the direct benefits of having to do this? Because I can remember when we first sort of signed on and, you know, started going in, you were getting substantial revenue from it. And it just seems to have been in the negative for so long. And I'm just wondering, like, is this something that you want, like, are you considering keeping for a longer period of time? Does it really have a cost benefit to the community? I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Like, if it's just going to cost us money every year, then why are we doing it?
So,
Okay.
if it's okay, Mr. Chair, I'll sort of deal with the larger issue there, and then Brett can speak to the specifics. But if we step back to 2010, 2011, when this gas system was being planned, there were a number of objectives, and they were in priority odor that was impacting our neighboring communities. Secondly, carbon footprint, minimizing the carbon footprint of the landfill. And thirdly, finance. So we have accomplished the first two goals, and we have had disappointing financial years over the last several. However, mid-year this year, I asked Mary Kay, I said, Mary Kay, let's go back and look at every year cumulatively to this year. And so what I'm saying is a little bit dated, but around May or June of this year, we had actually made money or had operated at a net surplus over time. So, and I think that's something that sometimes we lose sight of. But I'll let Brett speak to the actions that we've taken this year with respect to wells and how we're going to try to maximize the flow so that the finance side can be as robust as possible.
Sure. Thanks, Don. What I would say, even before I go into the technical aspects, what Don mentioned, odor control, it's been a big success that way. And keep in mind, gas management is sort of an industry standard these days. It's expected by the public. We had a serious odor issue when we implemented our gas collection system. For stage 1 was in 2006, stage 2 was in 2012. But Susan, we haven't received a single odor complaint in 4 years.
Mhm.
So, and we go back and we look at that, we have to report those to the province. And so we're 4 years without an odor complaint, which, is great. As far as emissions, it's effective in reducing our emissions by about 60,000 carbon equivalent tons per year. And so in that regard, we're one of the largest offset projects in the province. And there may be some opportunities in the future to capitalize on that. There's some interest in the province to start a offset trading program, whether within the province or within a group of provinces. And we're really well prepared for that because we've already developed a project in the past. So that may change the finances going forward. To be honest with you, cost management is going to be a challenge through to the end of the useful life of these engines. It's hard to predict what, by the nature of it, unplanned maintenance issues are unplanned. And we try to manage them as best as we can. But as I mentioned in my first comment, when we started talking about it, COVID really has been a challenge for us in maintaining uptime this year. For example, I think we had an engine go down in February that we weren't able to restart again until things settled down in June. That's unusual. So this year in that regard, it's been challenging. And in addition to that, we've had a few maintenance issues. It's not good for engines to sit idle for a number of months at a time between maintenance events. So those have been the challenges in a nutshell. I expect cost management will be difficult for the next year and a half or so. But as Don had mentioned, when you have new engines, life is good. They work great. I think I'm happy with the gas collection efficiency that we're achieving right now. And the odor, lack of odor complaints really speaks to that. We don't have a lot of fugitive gas at this point. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's good. I guess in my mind, excuse me, it almost takes on the same presence as the recycling. It's a necessity. It might not always be cost effective, but the other benefits outweigh the other costs.
If I could add one more point, and I meant to mention this, and you reminded me of it, as far as recycling goes, the alternative would be perhaps a centralized compost program with significantly larger costs. So we can either pick our own destiny, or it'll be chosen for us. And so we chose the more cost-effective method and more environmentally effective method of landfill gas management utilization.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brett. Oh, Mike?
Mr. Chair, if I might ask it, and maybe I'm just forgetting, but is there also any outstanding debt that's part of the financial pressures on the power generation in terms of the construction, the building of them? And is that coming due soon?
Yes, that's exactly right, Mike. We pay about $412,000 per year. That's included in those financial numbers in our interest and principal. And that is set to retire in 2023. So once that is retired, we'll free up that money. Now, with the refit of the engines, we are planning to borrow some more, but it won't be near the amount that was initially borrowed, which was around 4.2 million, I believe.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mike? Mike Chamberlain?
Yes, just to take that a little further, once the debt is paid off in 2023, do we anticipate a lot more repairs then on the engines after that?
So there's two major repairs that are going to happen in, I believe it's 2022 and 2023, Brett.
I believe so, yeah.
So those to the tune, they're about 700,000 per engine, and we are going to borrow for a portion of those to balance the budget is the plan.
I guess what I was asking is the engine's getting older, you know, when you pay off a car, then the repairs really start. You know, I'm just wondering if the same thing is going to happen with the engines.
So that retrofit of the engine, essentially it's going to be a new engine. Is that right, Brett?
Yeah, that's correct. It's a long block swap is what they're going to do, Mike. So they're going to pull the engines out, drop a whole new engine in, and the savings would be realized as far as our balance of plant, all that other infrastructure that we have in that facility, that will remain, but the engines themselves will be replaced at that time, and we'll end up with a brand new engine.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have any question? Just I just have one more again on the reserves. We're looking at, fairly significant capital expenditures and maybe operating losses. Where do we stand with our policy on the reserves, Mary Kay?
I have the reserve policy. I have a copy yet. I'm just going to stop sharing for a second so I can bring it up.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so on the landfill side, with regard to the capital reserve, so we have a goal of 1.2 million. So we're going to have well over that 1.2 million to the tune of 2,166,000, and that's just to prepare us for the time when, if our EIA is not approved, we're going to have to dip into that substantially to be able to fund that $2 million sell. So that one is being built up for a specific purpose because we know that there's significant expenses coming. The power generation fund, the goal is to have 800,000 in there. Right now we have about 68,000, so it's significantly less. We'd always hoped that we could build that up so we'd be able to use it for when the retrofit of the engines occurs in the next few years. That's just not been possible with where we're seeing the surpluses land in the last couple of years. Okay. But other than that, our reserve are in line with what the policy is laid out.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions, comments, Mary Kay or staff? Okay. Mary Kay?
Okay, so that leaves us with the recommendations that staff has come up with for you to consider. And so the first one is, just to summarize for you so you have it right in front of you, to transfer 145,000 from solid waste operating fund to the solid waste capital reserve fund. Now, that's not in compliance with what the budget had called for. The budget had an amount actually coming out of reserve fund. We were able to come up with savings, additional revenue that allows us to put money away for the future. So that's a positive thing. And then the other one is completely in compliance with what the budget had called for, and that's to transfer 214,329 from the solid waste operating fund to the power generation operating fund.
So who makes these resolutions? Do you do that, Mary Kay, or?
So I might say at this point, what were the resolutions would be passed by the board next week if the committee directs us to bring them forward. I would ask, what would happen is I would ask the chair tomorrow to call a special meeting for next Thursday evening, wherein the committee would present a report that they've had this meeting and that they are in support of staff's recommendation, and the information package that you've received will be part of that report. So So we're actually looking for direction of the committee, which we can take by consensus as opposed to a motion.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll just go down and get everyone's opinion on this. And John, you're down in the left-hand corner, so I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, no, I'm good with it. Good.
Okay. Mike Blaney,
Yep, all good to go with it.
Mike Chamberlain. You're on mute, Mike.
I'm fine with it, sorry.
Okay, Susan.
Yes, I'm fine with it.
And I certainly am. So I guess that takes care of your direction, Don.
Thank you.
You're calling a regular board meeting next Thursday.
Well, we'll ask the chair, we've reserved it, we've talked to her previously. And so what we'll do is we'll ask for a special board meeting to start early at 6 o'clock. And it'll be a two-item meeting. We'll do this, and we'll also have the dates for 2021's board meetings, ask for a resolution for that. And that meeting is typically very short in duration, or has been in previous years. And in this year, the board should have no issue with what we're talking about. One of the transfers is exactly what was in the budget, and the other one, and not only is not taking money out of the account, is putting money in. So I'd be surprised if anyone were to see it as a negative action.
Okay, fair enough. So does anyone else have anything that they would like to discuss with staff tonight? Or Mike Chamberlain?
Yes, I would just like to congratulate staff on keeping our expenses down. It seems like that's an ongoing trend. Reading over the financial statements, that staff has done a good job at that this year.
Okay.
Thank you.
Here, here.
Anyone else? Anything else?
We don't have anything, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Then would someone like to move that we adjourn this meeting?
I'll move to adjourn.
Seconder?
I'll second it and we're gone.
Okay. Thank you very much. Everybody enjoy your evening.
Bye, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you again next Thursday. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Take care now.
See you guys.
Bye.